Hi again. This is a report from a UK daily broadsheet about the final report of the Australian Royal Commission, but it really focuses on the victims, all levels of victims, all consequences of victims. Jehovah's Witnesses, one of the victims of Jehovah's Witnesses gets a mention in here as well. It's a very important article, I think. Starts off, nor any salvation, uniforms, headmasters of elite schools, or spiritual leaders from ashrams wearing flowing gowns. This was at the final day. At the end, the men, because it was overwhelmingly men at some of the country's most trusted institutions, who abused their power to assault and exploit innocent children or to cover up abuse when they should have spoken up, lacked the courage of their victims to show their faces. There was little of the Christianity they purported to preach. It was evidence of how the balance of power has shifted in the 5 years that the Royal Commission has exposed these decades of dark secrets in the nation's institutions. The survivors, and 15,000 of them spoke to the Royal Commission, have finally been believed. It has given them dignity and power. Royal Commissioner Justice Peter McClellan, he wasn't he humane, acknowledged their bravery. He never kind of got that. You can get some people, what they call compassion fatigue. I never saw that on him. Right to the end, you could see on his face shock and horror and pain, from what he was hearing. The survivors are remarkable people, he says, with a common concern to do what they can to ensure that other children are not abused, he said in his final address. They deserve our nation's thanks. They do indeed. He said the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse had exposed a national tragedy, and its final report, tabled in federal parliament yesterday, will be watched around the world. The horror stories have involved more than 4,000 institutions, with more than 2,500 allegations of sexual abuse referred to police. Announced in November 2012 by the then Prime Minister Julia Gillard, remains her greatest legacy. Governments and institutions now have to knuckle down, digest the 21 volumes of the report, and implement the recommendations which have been promised bipartisan approval. But it was the day the survivors had been waiting for, and they remembered those, here we go, that didn't make it. Who didn't make it, I just warn you on this next part, okay? As we stand here today, I would like us to remember those victims whose endless torture led them to find peace the only way they could, by taking their lives. Joan Isaacs said outside the commission on Thursday, the true number of these victims will never ever be known, and this breaks my heart. And if anyone is watching this, anyone is feeling like this, please get help. Pick up the phone to these free support lines. If you have people close, please talk to them. If you can't speak, write it down. Write it down. Get it out. If you can speak to a doctor, whatever it takes, because you so deserve it. You deserve to live. Isaacs told the commission 4 years ago that she was one of her teenagers lured into a cult that was in the Catholic Church. I've heard of this guy. Oh, sick man. Sick man. Horrible. The church did nothing about having him defrocked when he was convicted. Sound a bit familiar? Oh, the story is shocking, but all too familiar to the Commission's 6 commissioners, who have listened to thousands as bad, if not worse, in hearings around the country held in public and private, from the cruelty of the Parramatta School for Girls to the former head of Sydney's prestigious Knox Grammar. saying that offering the boys cigarettes and alcohol had been considered more serious than sexually molesting them. Here we go. A former Jehovah's Witness told how, as a teenager, you can see that. I can't say it. See, that's the cruelty. That's the cruelty when you're a religious person and you do this. Because what are you doing to that child's faith, to their relationship with God? You know? Because do you think children aren't praying? Do you think children who are brought up in this, don't you think that they pray and they pray and they beg to God? Don't you think that? And when those prayers aren't answered, and when their shepherds, if it does get as far as the elders, when that's not answered, what happens to their faith? And what happens to them? What happens to those children? Because if they leave, if they even try to fail, if they leave, they are shunned. So that becomes another layer of abuse that the other religions, we're not seeing examples of that. I haven't seen any examples or reports in this. Maybe they are the odd one. Not in the main religions. They are shunned. Look what you do to a child's faith. And you're going to keep the two-witness rule. You're going to keep the two-witness rule that perpetuates this. How dare you? And look, they've mentioned the suicides that it causes. How stupid are you? Watchtower, how stupid are you? You're not getting away with this. Not while we all live. Not while we have breath. Never. 60% of all abuse survivors attending private sessions reported sexual abuse at faith-based institutions, mostly Catholics. It's going across the board. Jehovah's Witnesses aren't being persecuted, but Anglicans were also abusers. Both have apologised. Salvation Army, they seem to have done really badly, very badly. A Marist paedophile. I don't know that. Ashram, wow. Lawyers acting for the Catholic Church and other organisations. Hello, Watchtower, we've seen it. Tried every trick in the book to prevent the victims getting any recompense. We've seen that. And yes, I'm ranting at Watchtower because that's the remit of this channel. And I rant at other institutions that kill people in other ways, innocent people. So McClellan, that's the justice, had parting words for leaders of those institutions that had to be dragged kicking and screaming to the commission. Don't forget, in this year's, when they've revisited the Jehovah's Witnesses, not one of the governing body members would give evidence. They refused to give evidence. So they couldn't even be dragged to the commission. That's how much they cared about their children. That's how much they cared. And found it almost impossible, I'm reading again, to admit they had been wrong and say the S word, sorry. We're waiting for that. We're waiting for that, Watchtower. There may be leaders, this is Justin McClellan, and members of some institutions who resent the intrusion of the Royal Commission into their affairs, he said. However, if the problems we have identified are to be adequately addressed, changes must be made. There must be changes in the culture, structure, and governance practices of many institutions. He said they had let the children down, some more intent on protecting the institution than the child. And there's that extra layer of guilt put on children and their families if the families want to report that you're not bringing reproach upon the institution, you are bringing reproach upon Jehovah, because the institution, that organization, and Jehovah are the same in Watchtower edicts. It's a national tragedy. Yeah. Although the primary, and this is another thing that apologists say, well, it's the, nothing to do with the church. It's the abuser's fault. Hello, hang on. Although the primary responsibility for the sexual abuse of a child lies with the abuser and the institution of which they were part, and the reason why the witnesses are liable is because of the hierarchy. You go to the elders first. You just do. You're brought up to do that, and you think they care. We cannot avoid the conclusion that the problems faced by many people who have been abused are the responsibility of our entire society, everyone outside these institutions, but anyone, again, I keep going on, anyone still within the organization, you have a responsibility with this. Please, please exercise it. Everything we have now, every right we have, as a woman, I think now as a woman, as a working class person, every right I have, such as education, things, someone fought for, someone had to care. And people who weren't even affected, they cared and they acted. Society's values and the mechanisms which were available to regulate and control aberrant behaviour failed. So I know I go on, I can't do it without going on, I'm sorry. Someone else would be doing reports without this silliness, but I can't. And if you've been affected, please, please get help. Please, you so deserve it.